Our panel today will be focusing on marketing and consumer behaviour. Joining our panel is Sanjay Bhatia. He is the General Manager of SeaWorld and SeaWorld Resort. We have Greg Scott, who is the Managing Director and CEO of Grand Motors Group, and Bond Business School academic Associate Professor Rajat Roy. Thanks for the panel for being here, and Greg, thank you so much for your time, and Sanjay, welcome, thank you for coming, and Rajat, glad you could be here. Our first question today, I'll ask you, Greg, is obviously it's been challenging over these past few months. How have you and your organisation handled it?
Well, speaking from the automotive retail industry generally, the 3 years prior to probably early 2020 were very slow. Vehicle sales were significantly lower than they have been historically, and that continued and worsened through February, March and April. The reaction to that was to try and protect people, protect health-wise and employment-wise, and actions were taken along those lines, of course, in accordance with most of the guidance and direction, some of which was quite confusing. But then in May and June, from a automotive retail sales point of view, there was a massive recovery. And I'm talking massive in the sense that May and June sales were probably the strongest both in new vehicle sales and pre-owned sales that we'd seen in 3 years as an industry. So it impacted us very negatively at the onset. It recovered and gave us some real good benefits in the May-June period. Going forward, we're not sure what's going to happen for the moment.
Great. Sanjay?
I think from our perspective, this was a very, very swift downturn, and we were having probably one of the finest years financially and operationally in the last decade, until April came and everything just stopped. It was unprecedented, and we did not know what was going to happen in the future. So that's a blend of three things that it causes a real chaos. For us, I think the biggest thing that we had to do was our businesses had to sustain themselves so that we can come back when the businesses do start to come around. And I think for us, managing our cash flows at that point in time, we've got about 4,500 employees, and I think their well-being was very, very important for us and any organization which wants to survive through this. So that was one of the key priorities for us, that we actually were engaging with them and keeping them engaged during this period. And of course, more than anything else, closing our businesses is something that we haven't done ever. Businesses always stay open. So we had to do that in a very sustained way so that the disruption is as limited and we could come back. And I think the next step really was to make sure that we had enough resources, including funding available, to open in the new norm. And those three things really posed quite a lot of challenges which we overcame during this period.
Great, thanks. Rajat?
Thank you for being here, Greg and Sanjay. My question is about consumers. So businesses exist because of our consumers, and these are trying times. We had bushfire, then we had COVID. What I'm trying to understand here is the underpinning consumer psychology. What is that common man thinking? What is he doing? How is he reacting to all those challenges that exist currently? Can I have your thoughts on that, Sanjay? Because you come from a very interesting background, the tourism industry. Then I'll go over to Greg, who's really all about cars and luxury cars.
I think, as you would know, tourism industry has been the first one and probably the largest impacted. We sit at a place whereby discretionary spend is definitely important for people. But more than that, the element about people not being able to travel, not feeling safe to travel, the restrictions put by the government, all that just straight away stopped everything that was happening for us. From a consumer perspective, I think initially when this whole thing happened, there was a lot of panic. People were just shutting themselves down. They were very worried about their physical health and well-being. But I think immediately after that, people realized that, financially, they don't see whether they're going to survive. And I think that brought a certain degree of mental, challenges in their minds. And I think immediately after that, then they realized that they're in lockdown, so they can't do normal things. So I think those three things played from whoever we spoke to. We had a target that we had picked up about 200 customers, and we spoke to them. What is going on in your minds? And this was exactly what they spoke to us. But we also knew underlying part was that they were all wanting to still engage with their families and friends, and that part is human nature. That never stopped. So their consumer sentiment did say that if and when things were okay, that the life will go back to normal and they will start to travel. So that sentiment we definitely saw in consumers' minds. Targeting-wise, I think there were probably 4 mindsets that we saw. One is those people who just did not have any money at all, that their jobs were totally stopped and they had no incomes. They, of course, were totally switching off from thinking anything about travel or using our services. There was a second kind of consumer whose jobs were there, but they are worried about what is going to happen in future. And hence, while they want to get out, they were not willing to spend at that point in time. And then there were those people who probably were constantly working. They know their incomes are secured for future. They were really just wanting to do things. And we saw that the moment restrictions got lifted, that was the first group that came back. But I think the biggest thing that still stays in people's mind is top line is still safety and security, and that immediately comes up.
Thank you, Sanjay. That was a very interesting point about getting out with the family and spending some quality time. Moving forward to another industry, automobiles and cars, we're talking about empty car bays and having a good rebound back in May and June. What do you reckon, Greg, what's the driving force behind that?
I think, as Sanjay said, in that earlier period, that February, March, April, people were very concerned. And whilst we were fortunate in that the automotive retail industry was nominated as an essential service provider, which we're very pleased about, but we're also very concerned about how we're going to conduct ourselves over that period, particularly in terms of health and or protection of employees and, last but not least, customers and prospects. So we managed to have a period where we didn't have many customers and prospects attending to at least regroup and say, well, okay, if this continues, what do we do? And then we ramped up what we do very frequently. We really ramped up the customer communication. And we schedule communication on many fronts, but primarily on vehicle purchasing, servicing, finance renewal, every 6 months. You've got to be careful we don't go beyond that. So we ramped that up, and we changed the thrust and the content of the messages to talk about, please visit, we look after you. Don't be concerned coming to see us because we're taking some extreme measures, most of which are abided by most of the time, to ensure that health and safety from your perspective will prevail. We primarily saw the downturn and the reluctance to attend in service. Vehicle buying almost ceased, became almost non-existent. Service is something that, whether you like it or not, you've got to do it. And if you don't do it, the vehicle will constantly remind you that it needs doing. We saw that drop off dramatically, something around about the 60% mark. And people were due for service, but reluctant to come in. Our messaging to them, particularly and we're aware, as that at the same time they are, or simultaneously around about the same time, that their vehicle needs servicing, we were then able to give them the confidence through that messaging that it's okay to come in and we'll look after you. And fortunately, it all worked out very well.
Thank you, that was very insightful, but you have raised another interesting topic here, the topic of focused targeting. So people behave differently in response to COVID and all the ongoing challenges. Sanjay was mentioning certain segments are more likely to do something, and that was reflected in your thoughts. How can you go about more focused targeting, that means addressing people who are more likely to purchase your product service, so that your efficiency goes up during the recent times?
as I said, the success in the retail automotive is how well you do customer-centric. And customer-centric is very, very broad, as you well know, but we with the aid of very sophisticated computer systems, we're able to know when those touch points or targeting is required. We have a different approach to the various categories of customers in retail automotive. I won't even go beyond vehicle purchasing, but there's many, many aspects of the purchasing cycle or cycles. But we probably, in general terms, retail vehicles to the business sector and the private sector. Between those two, there's some variations with corporate, etc. But we specifically target to finance contract terms in that we're reviewing those constantly, or reminded, or the systems remind us constantly as to when they may be coming due. We generally don't start that till, say, within 6 months of that expiry time, unless there's particular circumstances. We ensure that we're constantly reminding folk that the vehicle they have has just been upgraded substantially or replaced with a new model. So there's an awareness there that we're very proactive. Without taking it to the point of harassing or hassling, we're very proactive, and you've got to be very careful with that, because people react quite negatively if you take it too far. So we target about ownership, but then beyond ownership, if you say the customer element versus the prospect arena, we then use a lot of digital, and I think you're going to talk to that further on, but to broaden beyond existing customer and database, we use a lot of digital.
Thank you very much. Sanjay, your thoughts on that? Like, how can we target?
I think this is a very chaotic time, and I think people try to rationalize it too much. What we have experienced is that there are, targeting is no different to what we have done in the past, honestly. It's exactly the same. You still sell to the customer, the right product at the right time and to the right person at the right price. That hasn't changed. What has changed is the dynamics of who is right and when is the time right for them and what is the price point at which they will buy. And for us, I'll break it down into really specifically for the resort, which is the hotel. Now, we knew that there was no travel happening from anywhere but Queensland. And I think we knew that people are going to take holidays, they're going to take shorter holidays. And we were targeting Queenslanders when it was June. And the moment New South Wales was opening, we knew that it's going to be slightly longer stays. And we were targeting, specifically that particular, consumer. We also know that people are definitely wanting at this point in time certainty that if anything goes wrong again, that they are able to get their money back. And I think that's a very important, sentiment that the customer was showing, and we had to look at that. So anything that we were selling in long term over the next 18 months, because people do buy holidays and annual passes, the assurance was given to them that they could cancel. Those policies were changed. And I think from a, One Pass, which is one of our largest businesses for theme parks, we did say that, if anything happens, we extended their annual passes without any charges to them. And we did say that if anything happens in future and they bought it now, that we will further extend that. So I think that assurance was essential. So those are some of the things that we, did differently. But apart from that, I think the same fundamentals of marketing did apply.
So to me, it seems like that it's all about building consumer confidence and telling them, we are with you on this. So building that safety net, providing that extra bit of confidence and creating emotional connection with them could go a long way. And I got a reflection of that in what Greg said, and I'm getting a reflection of that what you are saying. Anything in particular about product strategy, like Sanjay was talking about creating different price points. It could be product customization, giving them unique finance strategy, giving them that confidence that we are here for you, don't worry. So any confidence building measures that you can think of, Greg, that could be interesting?
the financiers, and we use both factory-based financiers, as in Toyota Finance or Mercedes-Benz Finance or BMW Finance as examples, and other financiers external to the industry, we were able to convince them as an industry to be supportive of people that were having difficulty in funding or supporting, or the capacity was reduced because of loss of employment or reduced employment hours. They were very responsive and supportive, and were able to defer payments for an agreed period depending on circumstances, and there was a lot of them, as you can imagine, around the number around vehicles financed within the total retail sales arena, on new vehicles particularly, is somewhere around 90% plus. So there was a lot of people affected who, as I said, had reduced hours or no hours in some instances. We first saw that in requests for assistance and help from the tourism industry, followed by the hospitality industry, followed by the airline industry. So there's a lot of people really, really affected in those arenas. In terms of vehicle purchasing, I mean, we are very aggressive as a rule, irrespective of the state of the world or the economy. We are very aggressive retailers, and as consumers, and I suspect you all are, you probably realise that. So we don't have much scope to do much more as a retailer. The factories, yes, there was some support coming through, but predominantly more about assisting in moving certain slow models during the slower period, which was that February, March, April. When May and June emerged and the level of inquiry increased so dramatically, nobody from the manufacturer side was really wanting to do anything. In fact, they didn't have to. As I said before, that term was quite remarkable in May and June. So there wasn't much change on that over the period. I think had the lack of inquiry, the lack of sales continued through May and June, it would have been quite different. In fact, there were discussions leading into that as to how do we engender or encourage more people to buy. I think people were waiting to buy with that uncertainty that Sanjay referred to previously. I think the disposable income in several instances, or many instances, was there. They just weren't prepared to part with it at that point. But then May and June became, for want of a better expression, the sugar hit for vehicle purchases.
So it's interestingly, COVID is actually throwing up new opportunities. It's
It has.
I went to a dealership and I saw absolutely empty car base. Mm-hmm. I call up BMW, they're selling out fast. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Sanjay, is a good way to create emotional connection with your customers given the recent times?
See, for us, our customers are all there every day, and we connect with them every day, right? And for us, that had just totally stopped. I think, and these are the times when you strategically sit down and talk as to how do we connect with them. And I still remember the first meeting, of course, that we did of our task force was to decide how we're going to close the business. But the immediate meeting after that was, we want to keep the communication open, but what are we going to tell our customers and our employees? Because they were all not there physically in front of us. And I think what came up was that we want to reassure them that we are here for them, and not just by saying that we're here for them, but by telling them that if they had any product that they had purchased or would be purchasing, that they have the assurance that they are not going to be not going to be out of pocket, and we will make sure that if they need any kind of surety of refunds, that will be done. And I think more than anything else, our people have connected with our brands, in a very, very emotional way. That's what they do. They come for fun. They come to connect with their families and friends. And for us, that messaging that, the core of our business is not going to change just because we've closed. We did quite a lot of brand-based, advertising and communication. I think one of the other elements that we used was that when people come to our theme parks particularly, they get very connected to, particularly in SeaWorld, for example, to the marine mammals, and and we did a lot of social media posts which were all related to how well we are taking care of them and also how well we are taking care of our employees. And that was the first period of whole of April, and part of May went in that. And the second emotional connect, of course, was that we are getting ready, when you are ready to travel. And I think it moved to that, and that told them about our plans of how we're going to keep things safe, and also the fact that there are projects that we were doing that they're all going to be started, or they're going to be, and safety. This messaging was done. There was no direct selling whatsoever till we actually got tactical selling only started when we got to the month of June or July. And I think people responded very, very positively to that.
Well, thank you, Sanjay. That was very insightful, Greg, as well. We are shifting slightly focus here. Which marketing cost would you reckon would be essential in current times? Because companies typically hold back on costs, including marketing costs. You're mentioning advertising, financier, and all that, associated cost of reaching out to a consumer, confidence building measure. Which cost would be absolutely important to hold on to for branding, customer confidence building perspective?
Maybe I'll take that. I think people connect to brands, particularly brands that are existing for a long, long time. And the first part is that we cannot stop talking about our brands. And whatever is the core of the brand need, we have done that constantly. We've created content and fed that to our consumers and customers directly, and then those who are not our customers. It's all about what we are. We have actually done more work towards that than trying to sell them a product. And again, there is no doubt that if we were spending $1 million on a media every month, that was gone. It was not going to be there. So we had to rely more on things which is I would say that was already happening in the world, where people were doing contents which were not very difficult to make, whether it is employees just doing something with iPhones or the real stories. And I think we just supercharged that because there was no other option. And we really used every social media platform and digital platform to reach them. And we were successful, fortunately, with that. And one small example is that, for the SeaWorld brand and the resort, we would probably spend, good about 250 to 300K on tactical advertising, which was print and, radio. But we totally stopped that, and we did campaigns worth $2,000. And what we saw was that if it is rightly targeted, people will actually, the intent to buy was there, and the effectiveness and the return on investment on a small spend was probably multifold than what it would have been in normal times. We're slowly starting to now move towards radio. Print, I think, will still be far away, but people have time. They're sitting at home. I mean, why would you not use the digital element of it? So that's what was very effective for us.
Go ahead, please.
And not very expensive in these times.
That's a very interesting point. You have actually maximized your return on investment while being effective and on target. Would you have experienced something similar, Greg, with your advertising budget?
From the budget, we'd have a mix of conventional as in radio, conventional media, other conventional media, and then we'd have the for want of a better term, the digital spend in a broad sense. We stopped all conventional as a cost-cutting measure, but also as an opportunity to evaluate just how effective or not it actually is. We knew it was waning. We'd been reducing it over probably the last 5 to 8 years. It's very hard to quantify and measure how effective it is, as you well know. whereas the digital, you have much more scope and opportunity to be able to measure it. People tend to be very enthusiastic about interacting and responding, so you get a good measure as to just what that effectiveness is, and you can actually trace what occurs after that message is sent and or responded to. So we've really focused on doing a better job with that. It's a lesser spend, as Sanjay says. A lot of it's internal. I mean, there's obviously providers that don't charge small amounts, but sort of relative to the broader media, probably charge value for money on a better basis. So we saw it from a P&L perspective, a reduction in the conventional, but we probably saw it increase on the other unconventional line, if you like, in the digital space, which we're always planning to do anyhow. We probably just got a big kick along by virtue of what occurred in those three very, very, very slow months.
I'm glad you brought the digital thing up, because it's like giving power back to your consumers. It's the consumers co-creating the brand with the company. And if you manage and control it, your consumers are doing the marketing for you.
They do.
So you are actually doing a much more effective marketing strategy at a fraction of the cost that you'd have spent in traditional media. I think I will have one final question for you. The current time means disruption. We are rethinking, re-strategizing whatever we are doing, and that applies for marketing. What's your biggest marketing innovation in response to this disruption, the ongoing disruption? I'll start with Sanjay probably and then come back to you, Greg.
You're right. I think the biggest thing that comes out of this is that things that we were holding off, they've all become upfront. And one of the big success stories for us and our business is that we had actually invested quite a lot of money in launching state-of-the-art app for our theme parks and our businesses. And it was kind of there, but not really fully launched. The app was launched as we opened the parks. We fast-tracked that. The app is a very, very capable app, which is developed purely for theme park businesses or similar businesses of entertainment, where the consumer is able to get everything, things like virtual queuing. They don't have to stand in queues, right? And then the biggest part was that contact tracing was a very big thing. We took that opportunity. We went to the government and saying, we will do contact tracing for you, because our app is actually able to map where a customer is, at what point in time in the park and sitting with whom. And with that, we were able to fast track that app. And normally when you launch an app, our experience has been the download rate is about 35 to 40% initially. We had a 95% success rate in app download. Now, these are customers that otherwise would have been very difficult for us to reach. And now we can reach them so effectively, because they are actually not just very happily downloading the app, but they're retaining it and keeping it. And they're, we are able to profile them, and we are able to see their, spend habits. So I think for us, that has been probably one of the biggest things that we have done during these times. Rest is, I think we all know that there'll be opportunities out of this. And we know that there are businesses which people are going to be hesitant using, which are in direct competition for us. I think cruise industry is going to struggle. For us, we see a big opportunity, and we are going to reach out to that consumer base. We know that also airlines are probably going to be slow, as the flights are going to be probably lesser. And I think drive market is going to be gaining popularity. I think people will use more cars with their families to get here. I think we are going to continue to work on partnerships with we have already started some work with anything to do with transport, which is ground transport. So whether it is car sales, if you're selling a car, you get a holiday. Because I think those things are going to become forefront for us, and we're going to continue to work on those opportunities.
And that fits well with the Good to Go Queensland campaign.
Yeah,
go there driving and visit our state, beautiful state. That's amazing thoughts, Sanjay. I really like it.
And I think people feel comfortable that if they're traveling with their own family group, the chances of them getting affected are lesser. So I think it's a confidence in them. And to just give you, Greg, a little bit more confidence, we have never seen our parking so full ever. That what we saw during the 2 weeks of school holidays. So that is an indication probably why car sales is up. I think that mode of transport will be used more often.
So there is opportunity for collaboration. The next thing I can think of premium experience for Mercedes Gold customers at your resort.
Sure.
There are opportunities.
So partnerships is a very, very big opportunity here strategically and tactically.
Thank you, Sanjay. Greg, your thoughts on any marketing innovation?
I think from a disruptor-interrupter point of view, as opposed to Sanjay is probably in a better position than we are competition-wise, and I'm not saying you don't have any, but we've got about 70, some of whom we have, the others 62 we don't. We face disruption in interruption constantly, whether it be brokers trying to bypass the dealership function, whether it be alternative financing, alternative renting, many people out there in various shapes and forms trying to take our business away from us, or take a portion of our business and redirect it away from us in facilitating and completing it. We've managed to deal with most of those, in fact all of those, some to a lesser or better degree, but we had no answer to this, and we still don't. We think we've done well in that we were very, very fortunate to be nominated as an essential service industry, as I said before. That permitted us to at least keep some of our employees working. It also permitted us to qualify from the job seeker point of view, which further assisted, particularly with our casual folk who weren't in a good place. Sadly, we've got, sadly and fortunately from a point of view of contribution, we've got a lot of immigration visa folk who we weren't able to look after via the government support, but we found other ways and means. In fact, the thing that came out of this more so than anything from our teams and employees across the board pretty much was that those that had annual leave that could take it versus those that didn't, they were actually happy to take the annual leave and let the person that didn't have it stay on. When we had split team, and we purposely split teams so that we had 50% of a service team at home and safe and the other 50% in a workshop. If something happened to that 50%, we had the backup, but we're also able to mix it, leave, support, etc., etc. So far, I know we're not through it by any way, shape or form in terms of the entirety of it, and who knows what the entirety of it is. But we've done well on that front. In terms of innovation or means of changes to our operation beyond the focus on employees, but certainly the other methodology we need to deploy and have deployed is to find ways and means of keeping the business going to keep those people employed. I think I go back to what I'd said previously about we've really fine-tuned the communication processes and content just to say, hey, don't be concerned, we're here for you, but we're also taking a lot of measures to look after you, or try our best to look after you. So I think I think we've managed to deal with it thus far, and we had a lot of things in place that were already giving us the options or opportunities to be able to deal with it. We just needed to refine them.
I think I may just add one thing to that people do definitely, they're at the edge whether they want to buy something or consume something or not, unless it's really essential. And I think giving them a reason to be just that little incentive. People want more value than ever before at this point in time, but it still has to be relevant. It cannot be something that is not relevant. So our biggest thing in future, and I'm not talking about what we have done, what we are looking at now is what is that thing that we're going to find which is going to be relevant, but is going to be an add-on value for them. And you will hear more from our businesses what is coming on that. But we are already working on that. So the next 6 months, people who are sitting on that tip where they have that probably desire to spend and desire to travel, we'll be ready with something, because now the incentives are going to work moving forward. Because I think people are going to be a little bit more assured about safety because they've seen what has happened, what measures have been taken. That is probably not going to be, it'll be important, but not forefront. I think the next is giving them some incentive to purchase or reason to buy, reason to travel.
Well, thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Greg. Before I hand back to Lisa, in my understanding, it's all about building consumer confidence, creating that brand experience, and looking internally at your processes and enhance effectiveness and efficiency with what you're doing. Because we have limited resources, your consumers are scared. So finding that sweet spot which kind of works out for all of us. Thank you. Those were very insightful and a very interesting discussion. I'm sure everyone would love hearing those practical tips that you shared. I think it's over to Lisa now.
So I guess just to wrap up, there's going to be some businesses watching that are going through challenging times. They may have lost their whole business or starting from scratch. So I guess from each of you, what would be 3 key tips in the marketing and consumer behaviour space that you could share with those businesses that may be watching that might need a bit of a hand? So Sanjay, can you think of 3, 2 or 3?
We all talk from experience more than anything else. And everybody knows the last 3 to 4 months have been very, very chaotic. And I think if there is something, from a personal perspective, I'll share this with you, is that what has worked is that in this chaos, when there is nothing available for you to make decisions, okay, or a little bit of data is available, but not much, I think don't get caught in the clutter. People will spend. People have that desire to do things that they've always done. What has changed is really the fact that currently they're worried about their incomes in future. And I think second, they're definitely worried about what is going to happen in terms of safety and health. And I think if we can get those 2 elements in our messaging right, stopping communicating with the customers or your consumers or new consumers is not an option. Is definitely not an option. If we get bogged down in our circle of concern, and that can happen to businesses, that we are trying to, kind of hold our fort and survive our business, but we've just lost touch of what really runs our business, our employees and our customers. I think for us, I would say that is an essential element. So that's communication is important. We cannot stop that.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And Greg, any of your experience you'd like to share?
I know I keep re-emphasising it, but as Sanjay said, anybody that's struggling in their businesses at the moment, if they can't and mustn't stop communicating, and the customers or the prospective customers, the response to communication with them, in the fact that you're acknowledging them, you're extending some respect towards their and high regard towards their business and potential business and or existing business and the value thereof. I think that's probably the strongest element for any business, whether it be doing well, indifferently, or whether it be trying to come back. If you don't do that, then people don't know about you or lose sight or touch with you. And that's so essential, it's not funny.
That's great. So some fantastic tips from your experience and work in your industry. So thank you, Greg, and thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for tuning in to the Business Now video series. Hope we see you next time.